I'm Virginia.
Hi, I'm Nanette, and welcome to the Lively Office.
And today we have a very special guest who has joined us on our podcast, Stephen from Renowned Leadership. And Stephen, I'll throw you the ball.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for thinking of me. It is a true honor. And you know, I'm one of your biggest fans. I love your guys' stuff, and it's so much fun. So my name's Stephen. I am the founder and CEO of Renowned Leadership, where we help leaders, young and old, take back control of their careers, take back control of their organizations, and take back control of their teams and get themselves, get their careers, and get their organizations where they're supposed to be, not in this stagnant place that a lot of companies are finding themselves in nowadays. So yeah, that's who I am, and that's what I do. You can find me at www. Did I say 4 W's? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Everyone knows the W's. Forget I even said the W's. I'm nervous, okay? It's not like I podcast. But no, go to renownedleadership.com. I got tons of free resources for you. Just click on the free resources tab at the top right hand corner, and you'll see everything. I got all kinds of checklists. And my newest one is how to effectively lead a remote team. 3 basic tips to help you lead a better remote team, because that's where the world is nowadays.
That is.
So true. And today we're going to talk about performance, but not your typical performance and how to get people to work, but more about how employees view their own performance and the performance of their coworkers. So, Virginia, what was our thoughts on that? Like, how do we want to start?
Okay, well, so often I think I'm going to say corporate. We're going to use corporate USA for the example for today. So corporate USA, whether it's private or governmental industries, I think that there is a very emotional response when you see your peers getting things that you're wondering why you're not getting. Why is this person getting that opportunity? So I wanted to just dive into the good, the bad, the ugly part, in all of that, because focusing on that can really create a really super toxic work environment and a very miserable employee. The leader, sometimes you see an employee super miserable and you have no idea why they are so angry. And it could be something as simple as they feel like they're not getting an opportunity that somebody else is, and their emotional response to it. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on. Nanette, have you been there? Or Stephen, have you been there?
Well, I have a question I want to ask. I mean, I'm dying to ask Stephen this question because it seems like in corporate America, especially in a union environment, there's a lot of entitlement and a lot of I should get this and I should get that. So how does that compare to your background in the military? And what do you see as far as what the military entitlement level is? Because that's almost what it is an entitlement, because you feel like for whatever reason that you should get over somebody else.
So I'll answer your question first. That is, in the military, it's becoming more and more prevalent, the entitlement mentality. I got out of the Army in 2017. And, as opposed to when I went in the Army in 2001, there was no, hey, Sergeant, when can we go home? There was, you went home when you got told you could go home. And you better not ask. And then when I left, it is, you have Private Joe Snuffy standing at your office door wanting to go home because he's bored. You hit it on the head, Nanette, when you started talking about entitlement like that. I don't even know if it's emotional anymore. I don't even think it's that. I think it's just gotten so ingrained in our heads that we are special in some way and that we deserve more in some way. So anyway, whenever I think about that, first we got to understand where it comes from. And one of the things that absolutely takes me off is when people are like, it's a millennial thing. I disagree, because I'm a millennial and I'm not that way. So screw off.
I agree with you on that one.
I can say that.
I'll stop saying that.
It's not a millennial thing. It's a society thing. It's societal. I've seen just as entitled boomers as I've seen entitled millennials and Gen Zers.
True.
And in fact, some of the worst entitlement I've seen has come from boomers, the older boomers. For a lot of boomers, it's, oh, well, I'm old, so the rules don't apply to me. But that's the same mentality as a 21-year-old Gen Zer is I deserve more, so the rules don't apply to me. Either way, no matter how you get there, whether it's because I'm old or whether it's because I just deserve it, it's all that the rules don't apply to you. To truly fix this problem, we have to dive into where it came from. And this is where I might upset people. So I
Go
apologize.
for
And
it.
you can edit it all if you want, but it comes back from the parents, not just parents. I'm not going to blame just parents. It's when from society telling children that they're special and that they deserve everything that they want. And, you know, when I was growing up, it just started the participation trophies. And I remember I got a participation trophy for something stupid that I didn't even want to do. And I didn't even try, and I still got a trophy. And I was like, okay. Anyway, I took it home, and my dad's like, what's this for? And I'm like, it was like just some stupid thing I got in school. And he's like, did you do good? And no, I got last place, I think. And he literally took my trophy and threw it in the trash. And most people, when I tell them that story, it's like, man, that's harsh. And at the time, it was harsh to me a little bit, but I was never raised that I was special. So I was raised to work, man. If I wanted it, I worked for it. And there was, if I wanted a pair of $100 Nike shoes, my dad got me a job. I started working for money when I was 11 or 12 because I wanted a pair of Nikes. He had the money, but he wasn't spending that kind of money on shoes when you can get them at Walmart for 20 bucks. So that's where it comes from. In order to fix the problem, we have to understand that these people, the entitled mentality, it doesn't come from a place of laziness. It doesn't come from a place of thinking they're better than anyone else. It comes from a mindset that has been instilled into people from a very young age. They don't even realize it's a problem. To them, it's a foreign language. Whenever I talk to them, they're like, nah, bro, nah, that's not me. Like, it is you, but you're just too blind to see it because it's been ingrained in your brain so much. I'm sorry. I went on a rant.
No, that was good because you're right. And I think when you say it like that, it's not necessarily entitlement as much as is trained almost behavior is what you're trying to say, right? It's like a trained behavior
Absolutely.
because we've been, and you know what's I was going to say a while ago when I started to interject there is that I feel like we're doing a disservice to our kids when we're not giving them ability to work hard for something and then get that feeling that they get because they've overcome something. And nobody can overcome anything anymore because we haven't trained that muscle to be able to do that. I don't know. What do you think?
Absolutely, Nanette.
Yeah.
Science has proven that. I go back to the participation trophy. The research has shown that the kids that get those participation trophies, it actually hurts them. It has the exact opposite effect that we want it to have because they know that it's not special. They know it was just like, here you go. You kind of deserve this for showing up. And that they know it devalues the people that actually were gifted and actually worked hard to win. So it embarrasses them and ultimately hurts their psyche and, you know, possibly starts giving them complexes. And we see it running rampant. Suicide rates are higher than ever. Depression rates are higher than ever. Why? What changed? Because we started coddling. We started giving fish instead of teaching to fish.
So when they fail on something really simple that they feel is simple, they don't know how to cope with it because they've always been given a participation trophy.
100%. And think about what that would do to you. If you grew up in Pennsylvania where you're the princess and everything is handed to you literally on a silver platter, then all of a sudden your country gets overthrown and you get ousted to some other foreign country, and all of a sudden you have to work now. You have to go clean cars or pump gas or the case may be. Think what that's going to do to you. Your life has never been that way. You were special. But then when you go from high school to the real world or college into the real world, all of a sudden corporate doesn't care that you think you're special because you're not.
So we fast forward to a work environment with that same kid, that 21-year-old, bring him to work, okay? And he's been in a job for a year and a half. Company has goals, they have things that they need to do, and what skills does this person bring to the table, and then their perspective of feeling like upset or feeling like quitting when someone else is getting an opportunity to do a different job or to go to some other kind of training. How do leaders deal with that? How are leaders going to manage that environment?
I mean, it's actually funny because this is such a complex answer that we don't even have enough time to even scratch the surface.
Yeah.
But to this day, before I answer that question, to the day, leaders have answered this problem by trying to cater to this mentality.
Mhm.
And all that does is feed the monster, and it just grows stronger and stronger and stronger until finally you can't feed it enough anymore, and then it explodes. And you get nothing but toxicity from this, and it just creates the most toxic work environments you can imagine. In order to address it, the leader, like I said, first things first, you have to understand and have a firm grasp on why this person has this mentality. Once you have that, then you have to get that person to understand that they have that mentality. It's going to be a time-taking process. You basically have to reparent them and teach them that you're not special. Like, yeah, everybody's special. I get it, but you're not that. You're not a unicorn, man. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but you quit, I'll go find another one in an hour. Like, it's not that big a deal. So you have to get them to understand and coach them through, like, and get them to believe that, okay, so I actually do have a mentality problem. And once they understand that, then you can start training and get them back on the right track. But we're looking at like probably a 2-year process, 3-year process. I think as corporate doesn't have the time, nor do they care enough to fix the problem. I think corporate would just rather say, you know what? Nope, you're fired. We'll go find another one. And they'll keep doing that until it works, until they find the new one.
Well, I think the problem though, like what you just said, we've come to a point now where it's kind of plateaued. Before there was a more equal amount of old school, for lack of a better word, people that weren't in that training process you're talking about, that were given participation trophies. But now the participation trophy people outnumber than the work ethic people. So now we've come to a point where you can keep firing people, but it's going to cost your bottom line a lot. And you're going to keep
Mhm.
running through those same people. So that's one of the things, like, you have to have some kind of game plan on how you're going to attack this. What do you have to do? You have to first of all, make them realize that they're, like you said, that it's their mentality, but then you have to also somehow make them feel like they're wanted, needed, and valuable to your organization. So there's like a fine balance there, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, correct. And the number one reason anyone quits a job is because they don't feel safe. It's not because they don't like the company. It's not because they don't like the work they do. It is because they don't feel safe. They don't trust their boss. They don't trust the corporation. Whatever the case may be, it's not physical safety. They don't feel emotional stability within their workplace.
Well, they quit the
So
people, right? Is that what you're
yeah,
saying? They quit the
yeah.
people.
But basically, they quit their leadership or the corporation, leaders of the corporation. So, where you bring these people on, you have to handle it with such I guess, for lack of a better word, a feather. You can't just dump on them. If you dump on them, they're going to quit. But at the same time, you have to make them feel safe while giving them the hard truth. The only way I can, in all my experience, can think of to possibly do this is to build a good rapport, i.e., a good personal relationship with these individuals, which any good leader is going to do anyway. And once you have that good personal relationship, which what goes into building a personal relationship? The number one thing, communication. The number two thing, trust. Once you have those two things well established, then you can start chipping away at that I'm special armor and start training them to be non-entitled, productive people.
Okay, so you said something that triggered a thought for me. 4 years ago, I want to say it was like 4 years ago, that there was a mass walkout on Google, like worldwide. Do you guys remember that?
I
It
do
was
not.
Okay, so Google had this reputation of being the great place to work at, a fantastic place to work at. And 4 years ago, they had this mass walkout. And it was about allegations of a misconduct not being addressed and specifically toward women. So sexual misconduct from executives down the path. I don't want to say it in an ugly way, so I'm like really treading carefully here.
No
Like,
accountability.
yeah, okay, so they don't have accountability, but the company kind of like the cover up. Okay, let's just call it what it is. It's like everyone knows this guy's doing this, and no one's okay with it, but nothing's changing. So the culture of Google was a really good work culture. But I think ultimately that huge walkout that happened was because these people didn't have a voice. They felt unheard in the same way they felt unsafe, right? That's what you're saying. And also the communications wasn't there. Because I think the reason people get up and quit jobs and leave or do protests or do walkouts is because they feel unheard for these big problems that are going on in these organizations, right? So I guess I was just trying to get back to your point, Stephen, where you were saying that the biggest reason is because of being unsafe. And in my mind, I was struggling with the unsafe. I was thinking, well, is it unsafe or is it communication? But I feel like somehow that story, we're going to have to get back and do some research and get you two on board with this Google story, because that was actually, it was both. It was hand in hand. It was feeling unsafe and feeling unheard, to address the problems. And then I guess the struggle is that as a leader, how do I know this person is a person who feels entitled? Like, how do I know I'm dealing with that challenge? Because I think a lot of times these people who act this way or feel this way, they hold that in. They have emotional responses, and then outwardly they're acting one way, but then to their peers and others, they're talking about the situation and feeling like everything's unfair. So what does that look like to a leader? All that just for that question.
Yeah, I love it. I don't remember that Google story. I'm definitely going to have to look that up because that's really interesting. But to answer your question, in my experience, the most common way to identify it is they're always fine. How's your job going? It's fine. Same as yesterday. It's good. How is your relationship going? It's fine. How's your dog? It's fine.
Okay.
They're so emotionally unavailable. They can't even give you an emotion about how they're feeling with inside their own life because they just feel so destroyed. And something that I didn't say that I think is very important to say that you made me just think of is this is very real to them. To us outside looking in, it's ridiculous. But to them, this is very, very real. And it is very real pain. So, to just sit there and say, oh, well, you're just entitled, get over it. Nah, man, that's pretty harsh. I can't even think of an analogy to compare it to off the top of my head. It's insanely real. The way you know is by building, like I said, the personal relationships. Anytime you ask me a question, I promise you at the end of it, I'm going to bring it back to personal relationships because you cannot be a leader. Because what is a leader, right? Like, how do you identify a leader? I identify a leader as somebody that has influence, right?
Exactly.
It's not a title.
Where it's
It's not a pay grade. It's not anything. It's somebody that can influence the people around them. How do you do that? You do that with communication. You do that with trust. You do that ultimately with personal relationships with your team members. You identify the entitled people and you help break them of that mentality and nurture them back to a healthy mentality where they can become productive people in society by building personal relationships, by being an actual leader, not a manager.
No, that's a good point. And that's a struggle. That's a struggle for some people because I think a lot of people and in organizations, how people get into leadership roles is not necessarily especially in government, is not necessarily because they're a good leader. Maybe they were just a good worker, and then there was a hole to be filled. So then we have that problem, that just because you're a great worker, a great employee, doesn't transition to the fact that you have the skills to lead others, so there's that corporate problem too, right?
Absolutely. And I think I've told you that story before. After I got out of the military and started my corporate life, as short and miserable as it was, I had these two superstar hourly employees, like just they killed it, man. They were the best. And I identified it quickly and I started kind of nurturing and mentoring, leading how to become transition from being an employee to a leader. And of course, the corporation had its own management training program. And once they got to a certain point, it's like, hey, these guys are management material, like these guys are leaders. So they got swooped up into the program, came back, went and did their thing. And they ended up back with me. I want to say like 6 and 7 months later, both of them.
Mhm.
And they were just ticked off. They hated the company, they hated life, they hated everything. And I couldn't figure out what happened. What they were good at was the checklists and the numbers and the paperwork. Where I failed to teach them was the personal relationships. I didn't teach them how to actually lead. Unfortunately, I failed them and I taught them to be managers. And then when they went through the training program, it taught them the exact same thing. That is a habitual cycle in the corporate life. Habitual. I can't tell you how many times I've seen an organization, someone get promoted and demoted within the same year. And you can't maintain a healthy work environment in that atmosphere. You have to train good leadership. And I think the problem is corporate doesn't think it has the time, or corporate doesn't think it has the money to waste. But I disagree strongly. And that's another rant I will save for another day. But
Good.
man, I can go on that one.
Well, leadership results in turnover, and turnover is expensive. So I don't understand how corporations think that. But you are right. If you take even the small businesses like restaurants, they're the worst about turnover, and they literally have the worst management because they train their management to be managers and not leaders. I mean, it's really there's an opportunity in that industry alone. It's just such a big opportunity because they're so into the numbers and the customers and all that. They're missing that leadership piece so big.
What is the failure rate for restaurants?
I think
New restaurants.
70%. The
It's
turnover rate,
insane.
70% turnover rate, like
It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. So think about the money going into that. I don't know how they could afford not to do leadership training in those kind of environments because those are some crazy environments.
And I think what it boils down to is we've come to a place in society that we lack so much authentic leadership that, and when I say authentic leadership, I mean servant leadership, where you care more about who you're leading than you actually care about what you get out of leading them. That's my definition of servant leadership. We lack that so much in society today that we've forgotten what to look for. So I think ultimately that's what's led us into this management cycle. And don't get me wrong, management is needed as well, but management is an easy skill to learn, right? Management is paperwork and instructions. Like I can print you off a book, just follow this instruction book and you'll be a successful manager. Leadership, however, that takes years and that takes time and that takes experience. And I think ultimately, until we get back to where we can recognize the difference between managers and leaders, we're just going to keep repeating this cycle.
I want to say this out loud for anyone who's listening to this podcast who's just been thrust into that role of leadership. Did you hear what Steven said? It takes years, and this is super true. I am significantly better leader now than I was when I first started. It's something that you have to work at. It's something you have to forgive yourself. Like when you do something wrong to your employees, you've got to go back and fix it. And you can heal and you can grow together. And I'm not talking about constantly doing bad things to your staff and saying, I apologize, that's not going to fly. I'm talking about that genuine apology, that genuine growing. You guys grow together. I had a situation, which I think I've said before, where I had an employee who I would ask to do the work. And then they snapped at me once. And finally, I was like, barked back. I just barked back at you. I'm like, okay, well, listen, that was my nice way. That's what I'm asking you. But if you want me to be hard, let's go. So, and I'm like, okay, do this. And then from that situation, we both learned from each other. And then we ended up having this great relationship. So for anyone listening to the podcast, I know I have some children who are in leadership roles and they struggle. Like we'll have conversations and she wants them to quit. She's like, I just want to fire this person. I'm like, no, no, you can't just fire them, because our big belief here at the Lively office is that your employee's success or failure is a direct reflection of the leadership. So if they're absolutely failing, it's definitely something, it's on you. 99% of the time it's on you. I mean, you got the cuckoo clocks. Yeah, we get it. But 99% it's you.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
I would say 99.9.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it, So I have a question for the employee. So I want to switch the perspective. So what advice would you give to an employee who feels that they're not getting the opportunity? They're so busy looking at this guy over here getting them, this guy over here. What's the advice we want to give them? What can they immediately start working on to change that? Because they're miserable at work. They want to quit. So if you're going to quit, you might as well try something.
Yeah.
So the very first thing, and I get a lot of pushback from this, the very first thing I tell people is you have to take all emotion out of the situation. Nothing good ever comes. I don't want to say nothing. There is a time and a place for emotion, right? I go to my boss, Virginia, you're my boss, and I go to you and I say, my dad just died. That is a good time to show me emotion, right?
Agreed.
That's a good time for me to show you emotion because I'm hurting. Whenever a leader or anybody is trying to make a decision, emotion is the worst thing to have when you're trying to make a decision. When you're trying to find a solution, emotion is the worst thing you can have because our emotions lie. Tell me perception is reality, and we will fight for the next probably 2 days because I hate that saying with a holy passion. Perception is not reality. Perception may be your reality, but last I checked, there's only one reality, and that's reality. There's no my truth and your truth. No, there's just the truth. Stop it. Stop being silly, right? That's what you get when you deal with everything from the lens of emotion. Take emotion out of it. Once you take emotion out of it, ask yourself just a couple basic questions. Am I putting forth the effort? When I say putting forth the effort, I'm not saying, are you showing up to work on time? Are you doing your job? I've never in my corporate life told an employee that they did a good job for doing their job. Like that's expected, right? Like that's what you get paid for, right? To do your job.
Agreed.
So I don't tell you you did a good job for doing your job. That's just not going to happen. Even though corporate hounded at me and told me I had to, I refused. I would never do it. I tell the person that goes, they got their job done and now they've helped another 3 people get their job done so we can go home early, right? That's the person that gets the good job. So are you that person? Are you the person doing the extra work? Are you going the extra mile to make a difference within your team, within your organization, within the company? Are you going that extra mile? If not, that's probably why you're getting passed over. And there's a whole list of questions to ask yourself. That's where I would start, though. I don't assume you want to spend the rest of this time going over my list, though.
No, I think it's important Because I'll say this, I feel like I've seen that complaint the most across industries, that this person's getting something that I feel like I should get. When they're not getting the promotion, I think it's great what you're saying, stop the emotion. Heck yeah, they need to stop looking at emotion, making decisions when you're angry. Ask yourself what effort you're putting in, but what else is out there? The one thing that comes to mind is like focus on you, right? Like stop looking at everybody. Is that fair advice?
You know, it's funny. My dad always tells me if I just focus on the do's, I never have to worry about the don'ts. And how that applies to this is the exact same thing. Stop worrying. You're absolutely right. If you just worry about yourself and your job and doing the absolute best you can possibly do, then that's all you can do. It doesn't matter what Johnny next to you is doing. All that matters is what you're doing. And if you look at yourself at the end of the day and you say, I gave 120% and they're still not recognizing me for it, well, then you might have a legitimate complaint. There's might be something wrong within the culture of the leadership of the organization you work for. And if that's the case, then it's time for you to start looking for a new job. But again, if you look at this with emotion, it's always going to look like management's out to get you every single time. If I can take emotion and turn everything back to the world's out to get me. But if I look at it, why didn't I make that sale to that high-end client that I really wanted? Well, they just didn't like me. No, that's an emotional response. I need to go back and look at it without emotion. I need to look at it and say, okay, I screwed this up. And it's all about personal accountability. And if you maintain personal accountability, you're always going to be pointing towards true north. Uh, you got to give more than what you expect to receive. And it's just a good work mentality, in my opinion. One of the things that blows my mind is when people are like, oh, I don't get paid enough to do that. What? Or I don't get paid to do that. Like, you get paid to work for this company. And that's why I think the unionized thing has gotten so toxic. Good grief. I mean, if you're a mechanic, you can't pick up a screwdriver if that screwdriver isn't a part of your job title. And it's like, man, that takes away the cohesive team. That takes away a leader's ability to lead. I mean, heck, it takes a manager's ability away to manage at that point. Like, that's just horrible. So I don't know if I answered your question. I went off on a tangent. I apologize.
No,
That's
listen,
stupid
but the
squirrel.
tangent you went off on is definitely something the three of us need to do, because managing a union environment and leading in a union environment, all three of us have a lot of experience in that, I'm sure. And there's probably some stories there. And I hear some stories. How about you, Nanette?
I do too. What was really interesting about what you said was, it's not my job. It's not in my job description. Well, I think the focus goes there when it goes back to communication, when the vision of the company is not communicated well and everybody's not bought in on that vision, then they start talking about the penny ante stuff like, well, that's not my job. Well, if your job is to do the vision of the company, which is to help the customer, then all that goes away. And what's interesting about that, when you throw the union in there, the union's job and their vision is to get more pay, less work. And that never coincides with the vision of the company. So there's so many challenges in that to make that a cohesive team. Yeah, we could talk about that for days. I mean, like we could just do that constantly. But
I feel like we're going to stop right now. We're going to be like, welcome, because today we're going to talk about union environment.
Well,
so
interesting. Something you said before we go off on the union tangent, though, that I want to bring up is you were talking about. Actually, I don't remember exactly what you were talking about, but you mentioned the leader needs to communicate. And for the leaders out there, if you have an employee that quits because they felt like they got passed over, or they felt like they didn't have a future in the company, if that employee quits, even if it is a 100% an emotional thing, it is 100% your fault, because you are not communicating to that person that they are a valuable member of the team. More importantly, As a leader, you are not helping them grow. And one of my favorite things to teach is professional development. So it's basically where you sit down with each one of your team members every single month on a scheduled time, on a scheduled day, and you sit there and you just have a conversation for an hour at least about their performance, good, bad, great, ugly, and you talk about the things that they did amazing, and you encourage them on how to make them even more amazing. And you talk about the things they totally screwed up, and you coach them on ways to improve so they don't screw them up again. And then you end with the most positive, like, hey, listen, these are the three things I think you just crushed this month. I want to see them crushed again. Great job. Or if they didn't do a great job, then maybe you have to end it a little less happy, but you still end it on a positive note. Because I don't care how bad of an employee is. Hey man, you went to break on time today. Good job. Like they did something right. So if your employees are quitting because of that, it is 100% your fault. I don't care. Zero exceptions. Your fault. Communicate better. Do better. You're the leader. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah. Well, no, you're right about that. And sometimes you go too far though. Sometimes they're at the end of that rope and they're leaving and you can't even fix it once you realize it's your fault. But you can learn from it. I know that's definitely what happened to me. I was pushed way too far that I was like, it doesn't matter what you offer me now. I am
Yeah.
out. I mean, and I'll tell you what, toward the end, I got some offers. I'm like, where was that 2 years ago? I don't want to get into full detail, but I was offered very high level positions, got phone calls toward the end because they knew I was ready to leave. And they created jobs for me. And okay, well, I don't want to do this because of location. They've changed location of a job for me. I mean, I was offered some job and then my interview, we didn't even interview. They were like, "Okay, well, when you get this job, these are things I want to do." It was nuts and it was amazing because I'm like, "Thank you for at the end recognizing that I had some value and you don't want me to leave, but it was too far gone
Too
because it
little,
was
too
too,
late.
Mhm.
yeah, it was
Mm.
too little. Thank you. I don't know all those little fun colloquial phrases.
Colloquial.
Colloquial. Somebody tell me what that word is. I can never say it. Anyway, the hurt was too deep and I tried real hard not to be emotional. This chapter's just closed. This is such a broken organization. The foundation is cracking. We're flooding and there's no hope here. Unless I want to have absolutely no life, I could put all my attention to this job, but that's not the world we're in anymore. I think there's a lot of people who are really jumping off that 9 to 5 hamster wheel. So that makes leadership just so much harder now. There's that whole element.
Well, I think in your case, Virginia, too, it goes back to what Steven said. When we first got involved with the organization, it was a servant leadership mentality. And as we got to the end of the journey there, it was more of an entitlement leadership. And there was no examples anymore of what that servant leadership looked like. There was less and less examples. And the people that were examples of servant leadership were getting demolished, in the world. So that the phrase you like to use about boiling the ocean, we were boiling the ocean and we were doing that for the last 7 to 10 years. And it was finally like, okay, it's time for us to just jump ship because we're never going to boil the ocean. So that's kind of how we felt in that environment for our own mental health, which is sad because we loved it. So
Yeah, true.
it
It's
was kind of like what Steven said too about the military. It's just changed so much in that time frame.
And the thing is what you're saying, like in the beginning, it was servant leadership, and then it went to entitlement leadership, which you see more and more every single day, which I think goes back to the instant gratification,
Mm,
right? Because servant leadership takes time.
lots of time.
Servant leadership, it's not something that you just jump into and all of a sudden your team's smoking and firing on all 8 cylinders. No, that takes months, maybe even years. In my career, I've put together some pretty fire teams. They were amazing and I miss them every single day. That took years to build. and tons of communication, tons of respect, tons of coaching, tons of training, tons of time. It's not something that you can do overnight, as to where the entitlement style of leadership, where it's just about you. I mean, you can climb the ladder as fast as you want, really. So, I mean, you're getting from point A to point B in record time, and you got yours, and forget everybody else. At the end of the day, that's going to end up biting you in the butt, and that's not going to get you anywhere.
I just think, like you said, the building of that team, though, for me, I think that's my favorite part of being a leader, was seeing those little milestones and those little progressions. I thrived on that. That was the greatest thing ever. And even though you didn't have that team built to perfection, it was like finding that next step you could take your people and keep bringing them to that next step and having them overcome those obstacles. Like for me, that like put me on fire. I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah,
No,
Like
that's
100%.
seeing those people develop themselves and seeing those people go from being unhappy, miserable employees to actually enjoying their job. There's nothing better than that.
yeah, that's the
And
great part.
I think one step above that for me would be to see my team, that I say my team, but at that point, it's not my team, it's our team.
Mhm.
But to see my team full of people that would literally, and not just because it was military, but they would literally die for each other because they loved each other so much. They would literally go to the ends of the earth to help that person. They would drop whatever they were doing to help that person. Towards the end of my career in the military, I would never see one of my guys doing something alone. They always had help. And it wasn't because I sent them help. It was because they were a team. It's what they did. They constantly helped each other, constantly worked together. And it was funny. I made them a deal, and I was like, look, this is our list. The sooner you get done, the sooner you get to go home. And it was a long list, man. And they were done by 11:30 in the morning. Like, we're done, Sergeant. I'm like, bull. No, seriously, we're done. And so I went and checked. I checked every single thing. It took me probably a solid hour and a half to check everything, make sure it was done to par. And it was like, wow, you guys really did a good job. Okay, go home. And that became the norm. And everybody else was jealous because my guys are getting to go home so early. But that was the deal, man. And it's all because they work together so well. And that's what I loved, is just seeing this group of individuals come together and just become one working machine. It was beautiful.
All right. Well, we are coming to the end here. So, as a quick recap, if you find yourself saying, why not me? Why didn't I get the job? You need to check your mindset. You need to stay out of your emotions, right? And then ask yourself some hard questions. Are you putting forth the effort? Is that a good roll up?
I think so.
I think so too. Yeah, that's everything. The motion and the extra time. Are you putting in the extra? Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, Stephen. And Nanette, do you want to close this out and tell the world where they can find us?
Well, first of all, we're going to give one more shout out for Steven so he can tell
Yeah.
us where to find him.
Just head on over to my website, renownedleadership.com. And I got tons of free resources for you. Top right hand corner, free resources tab. And my latest free resource is a checklist on how to better manage your remote team. And also, if you want to see what working with me is like, you can get a complimentary coaching call, 90 minutes of just one-on-one coaching with me. Just click on the book now and it'll take you straight to my calendar. No credit card, no nothing. Just complimentary, 100%.
90 whole minutes. That's
90
big
whole
stuff.
minutes, man.
That's a lot
I
of
will
minutes.
coach my butt off for 90 minutes.
Okay, so you can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn at The Lively Office. It's
Mhm.
our handle, and you can also find us at thelivelyoffice.com. And we do have a free resource on how to love work again. You can download that for free. And thank you for being here, Stephen. We loved it. Can't wait till the next time.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun. I love you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Stephen.